Does Auburn really have a shot with a 5-star quarterback?
You are Locked On Auburn, your daily podcast on the Auburn Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On Auburn, your daily Auburn Tigers podcast. I'm your host, Zac Blackerby, and thank you so much for making Locked On Auburn your first listen every single day. It's Recruiting Thursday. We're hanging out with Locked On Recruiting Insider, as well as recruiting insider for auburndaily.com, Brian Smith. And of course, the recruiting coverage here at Locked On is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnCollege. Terms and conditions apply. Brian, since we last spoke, we've both seen practice windows for Auburn's spring practice. We'll discuss that. Also, a new commitment, a new member of this 2025 class. We'll talk about Ty Buster. But first things first, Auburn reportedly had a 5-star quarterback on campus yesterday. Julian Lewis, goes by JuJu, committed to USC, but it kind of seems like Georgia was the favorite. But just talking to folks, I think Auburn feels good about their positioning to land JuJu Lewis, the 5-star quarterback, when it's all said and done.
Well, he came back again.
Yeah.
The last time we discussed him on this show, I thought Auburn was kind of on the edge of the recruitment. We'll see what happens. I'm like, you got to get him back on campus before I'm interested in this. Well,
they did it.
There it is. So
yeah.
There's obviously interest between him and his dad and the family. So now it becomes a little more interesting. USC is obviously recruiting well. They just stole some kids out of the South. Maybe he wants to be a part of that. Maybe he doesn't. Why does he keep taking trips if he does?
Yeah.
Alabama's recruiting him too. This is a very unique recruitment. And his timeline could depend on where he ends up. Could dictate, I should say.
Mm-hmm.
And right now it doesn't look like he has a short one. So maybe it's Auburn. I just wonder when it would be. That is my humongous question. I have a feeling to everybody else too.
Yeah, Brian, I've heard some rumblings about, maybe Georgia's not as fired up about him because of a potential timeline as far as when he wants to commit. Because typically you see quarterbacks, Auburn did it with Walker White last year. You get your quarterback in the class and you kind of use that to be the face of your class and you build around them, right?
Sure.
And with a 5-star like Julian Lewis, guys would want to come play with him, I would assume. He's very good. He's very talented. Do you think if you're Hugh Freeze and you're Auburn, do you say, well, we kind of want our quarterback in this class, sooner rather than later? Or with a guy as talented as this, do you look past it?
Well, I think the answer to that is, where do you think you stand now? And are you building momentum? If you don't think you're in a good standing now and building momentum, can't miss on quarterback. We've seen that with every program, Auburn included, how that ends. I don't care who else you have on the roster. If quarterback's not really good, you're an 8-4 team at best.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're going to play the JuJu sweepstakes, you better be reading your cards correctly. So there is a lot of other guys, and Mr. Longstreet from California just visited recently. That's a big time player, a little more traditional RPO guy because he'll take off and make guys miss. Reminds me at least somewhat. I'm not saying he's the same player when I say this. Reminds me in his skill set, and he's also from California, as Jaden Daniels. So that's a kid, A&M, Ole Miss, Auburn. If you got either one of those, if you said you could have one or the other right now, we're not going to tell you which, but you're getting one of the two, he would say, check it. Yeah. It's because they're both elite players. So they're just a little bit different and where they're from and all that. But yeah, both of them are elite prospects, and I think Freeze would be more than happy either way.
Yeah. So you said you wanted to see JuJu take another visit to Auburn. Obviously, that happened earlier this week. I mean, is Auburn in it? Do you think Auburn has a legitimate shot to land a 5-star quarterback in this cycle?
If you take a second visit, there's a reason.
Okay.
You always follow the visit more than you do the mouth. And his dad doesn't really let him do interviews anymore. So the only thing we can do is follow the visits. And if he's taking trips to Bama and Georgia a bunch, but now the Auburn visit's the second one that I know of. There may be others and I don't know, because everything is completely under wraps with this. It's a very odd recruitment for the media to deal with. But if you came a second time, there's something to look at. And again, it's only freaking March.
Mm-hmm.
So if he's not looking to make a decision, truly, because he is technically committed to SC, which I don't really consider him committed, but whatever.
It doesn't feel like he's committed to SC, right?
That's how I look at it. You're exactly correct. So
right.
I would be surprised if it's not done by the end of June, because everybody gets tired of this after a while. Mm-hmm. But now the question is, you've had him on campus twice. When does he set his OV to Bama, to Auburn? Georgia, maybe? I don't know. If you're SC, you have to keep recruiting him.
Right.
I mean, they put all their marbles in on him. They're going to sink or swim. So I'm curious now. Is there anybody else? I don't think so, but at this point with his recruitment, nothing would shock me.
Yeah. And you're of the mindset, even though Auburn has two young quarterbacks that I think the staff believes in, Hank Brown right now, redshirt freshman, Walker White, true freshman going into the season. You're still of the opinion of like, you get a quarterback in every class pretty much regardless, right?
Unless there's something really goofy with your scenario, like you just got like your top three guys all have 2+ years of eligibility or something. I guess you could look at it that way. But no matter what, the problem is with the portal, one guy a year is going to leave a quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
By fall camp, one of those three guys, it's not Peyton Thorne's going to leave. I would bet you on it.
Yeah, I mean, I would be surprised if Holden Geriner was here in the fall. Yeah.
That'd be my guess. He's not a bad player. He's just Peyton's going to start. I know Auburn fans don't want to hear it. He's going to be your starter this fall. You can mark that down.
Right.
So somebody's going to leave. So if you miss a class and then you have it happens and somebody sprains their ankle or something, your whole season can go down the toilet just like that. So that's why coaches really prefer to take one every year. It's really hard to fight the logic. Yeah. So barring you just not being able to get anybody that's worthy of playing in the SEC at all, it's kind of hard to go against it. My only question is, are they just in on these two guys, or they have another backup plan that they're ardently recruiting, whether it's private or not, because he's committed elsewhere? It's a little more clandestine in today's world with recruiting, but they're after the big fish. So that's the other point. Auburn, under the last couple of staffs, just weren't in on that many guys like that unless they were just really local.
Sure.
They were just always local. Now, JuJu somewhat. He's 2 hours from Auburn, so that's a blessing, but Houston Longstreet's in California. So, like,
yeah, sure.
You know, they don't care for quarterback in particular. You've got to go. There is no boundary if you're going to be good. Mm-hmm. You know, Georgia goes after the Bowers guy was from California, the tight end that was so good.
Yeah.
Georgia, when I was a kid, didn't recruit California at all.
Right.
So football has changed and Auburn is changing with it. So that might be the biggest thing to take from this. We're just trying to get ball players and be as good as we can.
I'm so interested because I do think there's a ceiling as far as what Hugh Freeze and the staff can do from a recruiting standpoint until they start winning football games and start saying, hey,
100%.
Here's my offense. But man, if Peyton Thorne takes that next step, which I get why almost every Auburn fan is skeptical of that. I'm in that boat too. But if he comes out and slings it all over the yard and gets close to 3,000 yards passing, doesn't the recruiting pitch change to quarterbacks a little bit?
Not a little bit, a lot.
Fair. Yeah.
I mean, that's a spot you want to see it, man, because there's been coaches for years that were really conservative, especially when they had a local kid that was a quarterback that was good.
Yeah.
You know, like Woody Hayes didn't always get the kid he necessarily wanted at quarterback because his offense was so archaic.
Mm-hmm.
You know, are you going to pass the football? You have to prove it to me. Don't tell me about it. That's kind of the old saying. So
right.
I think Auburn would do very well. And like when we were at practice the last few times, they're really trying to figure out the passing game. They're doing a gazillion reps. It's not by coincidence. They want it too. You know, they know that the RPO game, you have to be able to hit shot plays, and they're throwing those in practice. They're throwing screen. They're doing everything. It's
you and I were standing next to each other watching practice together on Tuesday of this week. And I said to you, it's like, I'm amazed how much of the practice is going to just like throwing against air, no 7-on-7, no team stuff. It's one quarterback and one receiver throwing a route. Like you're not even doing like full patterns or anything. And just in the past, I don't feel like we've seen as much of that. And granted, we're privy to what they show us, right? So, you know, and every coaching staff does that a little bit differently, but it does seem like it's not quite there yet.
They're working on the very basics. They just want chemistry between 1 through 4.
Mm-hmm.
And to be honest, throwing on air, there's not a ton of difference between any of the 4. You can have Holden out there or anybody else. They all have good arms and they can all make the plays, but It's about timing and rhythm now. They got the 2 freshmen. They got the transfer from Cal. They got other guys that are coming backers, allegedly taking the next step.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
we're all going to have to see it in games before anybody cares.
Right.
But they're just taking it. This is their approach. And you talked about it. Hey, Thursday practice, I'll teach. They did a little bit of that on Tuesday as well.
Yep. That's right. So yeah, keep an eye out for Julian Lewis, JuJu Lewis, the 5-star quarterback currently committed. I'm using air quotes, committed to USC. Who could be the next to commit to the Auburn Tigers? We discuss in just a moment right here on Locked On Auburn. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at Nissan. This week's March Madness bracket highlight, of course, brought to you by Nissan, where each week they pick one team that stands out, a team that's pushed it further than the rest, just like any of the all-new 2024 Nissan SUVs. These guys were able to take it to the next level. The Iowa State Cyclones can only be described as a pathfinder. They've been thrilling to watch and have really created a lane for themselves entering the tournament as one of the hottest teams in the country. They have a date with Illinois later today in the Sweet 16. Take the Nissan Rogue, the Nissan Pathfinder, or the Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com. Today's show is also brought to you by our friends at Better Together. Look, there's a bunch of different daily fantasy sports games out there. Better Together is the only one that's collaborative. You and your friend talk a lot of smack about who's better at picking games, or you've got that group chat that is just blown up with, hey, I'm taking this prop or this line over and over and over again. Well, now you can kind of test that group chat a little bit more. It's also a way to stay connected with friends when gone are the days are watching sports together in person. Put the group chat to the test and prove yours is the best. You sign in, you make an account with the Better Together app. You use promo code Locked On, LOCKEDON, all one word, to get some extra play when you sign up. And then, you pick who you want to play with. And if none of your friends want to play with you, you can add me, Zac Blackerby, no space, ZAC, BLACKERBY. And we can make it happen. We can link up and play on Better Together. So it's fun. The tournament is here. Opening day is here, so be sure to check that out. Download Better Together right now from the App Store using code LOCKEDON for a free $5 entry into any NCAA basketball contest. Remember the code LOCKEDON because winning alone is fun, but it's better together. Brian Smith hanging out with us on this Cruton Thursday. I think I know what you're going to say when I ask this question, but I'm going to ask it anyway.
Okay.
Who is the next to commit to the Auburn Tigers if you had to guess?
Alvin. I'll go Alvin Henderson.
Alvin Henderson, the Elba running back. We saw him earlier this week. The guy's built. The guy looks great. Very jacked young man.
Yeah, I didn't get his physique, especially in the midsection. I was cheated. I need to talk to Alvin about that.
Sure.
But, he had 61 touchdowns last year.
Insane.
I know some people say, well, it was 1A competition, and it was, but every play is the same. Like I've watched a gazillion of his reps. His mentality is what I like. He will run around, he will run over, or he will just flat out shake you. He can do all three. So he could add more top end speed and stuff like that. And guys will do that once they get to college. Again, he's at a 1A program. It's not the same kind of weight program they have at like Buford, Georgia, or Thompson here in Alabama. So
sure. Yeah. Right.
His upside's pretty good, and he's just always at Auburn. I mean, I wonder when he was going to commit for months. I'm just going to keep saying Alvin until it's Alvin.
Yeah.
If I'm proven wrong, so be it. I'll go down with the ship on that one. But this is a kid they need because they didn't take a running back last year, and they really probably need to get 2 if they all but could in this class. So getting the local kid that's been to your campus 110 times would be the starting point.
Yeah, it'd be huge. It'd be huge. Something that stood out to me, and you've gotten to know Alvin a little bit. You've watched him a ton, and then you've interviewed him a handful of times. When we saw him, when we were standing together at that practice, and you pointed him out, and I pointed out, wow, he looks great. But you said he's a really smart kid. He's a really smart kid. And it's interesting. Like that's the first thing you said when we started talking about him, just you and I the other day. That stood out to me.
He's very savvy with the whole recruiting process, what he's looking for and development. When I asked him and interviewed him the last time, so, what are you basing your final decision on?
Yeah.
Where I can get the most coaching and get the best out of wherever I go to college, which unfortunately a lot of kids forget about that as a priority. Sometimes you have to go somewhere that may not be the most fun for some guy. Like for him, it'd be 2 hours away. That's pretty convenient.
Sure.
If it's Auburn. And he's got other, like Florida State's not that far away. That'd be another cool option for him. Okay, that's great. But he's got Miami wants him. Oregon wants him. Penn State wants him. He can go all over. So he's evaluating everything. And I give him that. He said he's going to take his Miami trip in June. We'll see. He's been down there a couple times. But at Auburn, not having a running back in this last class also means playing time. So I'd imagine that's going to make it a little easier for him to make the choice for the Tigers.
Yeah, for sure. As far as other guys that you're kind of monitoring right now, we talked about Tavares Dice. It seemed like for months he was almost like, as pointed to going to Auburn as Alvin Henderson, and he finally committed. But who else do you think should be kind of on this watch list of, okay, yeah, he could be in Auburn's class before all's said and done?
Well, any of the local kids, like the 2 kids from Enterprise, Eric Winters, he really likes Auburn a lot. Zion Grady, I know Grady is like, I'm in love with his upside, and he's a good kid too.
Yeah.
Everybody wants him. Most people like Georgia or Auburn for Eric. I think it's Auburn, but we'll see. Hard to beat Georgia for defensive players, and I get it. But that would be my pick. If I had to say, I would go Eric. It could be pretty soon. Zion could follow because they're buddies and they play at the same school, and that's an elite player too. Maybe even better than Eric. You could make the argument.
Sure.
Beyond that, there's 2 or 3 other in-state kids. Micah could still commit. DeBose, Anquan, the safety, Fagans was on campus again with his brother this Tuesday. Sure. The list is pretty endless, and this just as an overture, Alabama's always loaded with talent. This year's even better than usual.
Yeah.
So they could have a little more run within the state. It's fortuitous, and I'm not picking on them, but the board took over in a year that you would like to have done it a year earlier, but to have like your ducks in a row. But he's playing catch up with all those kids. So Auburn needs to take advantage. It's still Bama, I get it, but Auburn should win more of the battles than they usually do against Alabama in state.
They need to. They need to capitalize on this transition 100%.
Yes.
All right, since we last spoke, Auburn added the commitment of an interior offensive lineman, Ty Buster, an incredible name. It is pretty darn good. I have to give you that. It's exceptional. But you've watched tape on this kid. You know more about this kid than I do. Give us kind of a snapshot of Auburn's latest commitment.
His feet are fantastic. He's from North Carolina, plays at a public school in the state, and like he plays left tackle for him, but he gets off the snap right now. And he's not got the stature, I would say, to end up at left tackle. He's 6'3"-ish, but with his footwork and his power, the way he brings his hips into the battle, he's going to be a guard or a center, and that'll take care of itself. That's not a young man that you want to be in front of. He'll get out on a screen, he'll get out on a zone, whatever. He can get around a guy that has the edge and beat him to the spot. This is an athlete. So he reminds me a little bit of Tavares, just a shorter version. So they're really looking for skill along the offensive line, for lack of a better way to put it. But
what are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on, like, because so many people say, oh, he's a 3-star, whatever. And his offer list, like, it's okay. It's not great, but like he's got offers from Penn State, I think was the most decorated school that offered him, that seemed to be pursuing him. But the fact that they went after him so early tells me that the staff believes in him. You agree with that?
Well, 2 things. Number 1, that's 100% correct. Number 2, he's not from Charlotte. Like, he's not from like in the city. This is just how it works, especially early on. Everybody goes to the same camps to do the rankings. Mm-hmm. If you're not one of the camps early, and the Charlotte camp's not for a little bit for Under Armour, nobody knows about you yet. So he's not from a big proximity area for all the guys. So it's a little harder for him. The other part of that is he's an offensive lineman. It is hard as hell to grade underclassmen offensive linemen. So I don't put a lot of stock in that. Penn State likes a kid. Their offensive line is pretty good. If they like a kid, that's a good sign. If Auburn likes a kid, that's a pretty good sign. And his film doesn't lie. He's a really good athlete. If he played in Atlanta, he'd have more offers. He'd be a higher ranked kid. It is.
Yeah, I get it. So yeah, don't sleep on Ty Buster for sure. Auburn's latest member of the 2025 class. All right, let's get your observations so far from spring. Brian, we discussed that next right here on Locked On Auburn. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at Amazon Fire TV. Fire TV is your destination for sports, from live games to highlights to in-depth analysis. Fire TV offers an amazing viewing experience with smart TVs, as well as the Fire TV Stick, which you can just plug into your TV and it essentially makes it a smart TV. Much more affordable option than just buying a whole brand new TV. So be sure to check that out. I can't imagine watching a TV on anything other than a Fire TV at this point. So they recently created Fire TV channels, deliver a constant supply of the latest sports content from the biggest brands. Locked On Sports Today is one of those, 24/7, just live, local, and national content. Be sure to check that out. If you haven't checked out Fire TV channels, you should. Trust me on this. To learn more, go to amazon.com/LockedOnFireTV. Final few minutes of today's edition of Locked On Auburn. Brian Smith, recruiting insider, hanging out with us. But you've been to all of the media availability. You've been to all of the practice viewing windows over the last few weeks. Brian, your biggest takeaway, give me one positive and give me one negative, if you don't mind.
I'll go with what we saw Tuesday, just in a couple of weeks. The difference with the freshman defensive lineman, and even Falk too, he's a second-year player.
Yeah.
You can tell they're starting to get it. It's just repetitions. There it is. Yeah, there it is, Jamonte. Look, there's a lot that you can do with young players situationally. They're not going to take 250, 300 snaps apiece. You'd be into a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like Amaris, Jamonte, like all the defensive linemen in particular, I've just focused on them because they need help up front. There's no hiding from it. They're young. They've already started to take steps. So that's a positive. Number two, the negative, like I still, like you, I'm a little concerned that I understand the teaching points on the passing game and stuff. But while Auburn is doing basic stuff, there are other schools who they're going to play this season, many of them that are doing fast-paced fireball. Here we go down the field. We know who our quarterback is. We know who our number 1 and 2 receivers are, and they play together. There's just no way to fix that short term.
Well, I think the frustrating part of that, Brian, is while Auburn's doing install stuff and a lot of teaching, and obviously that's important. I get it. I'm not downplaying that. But like you said, the folks that Auburn's playing against, they don't have to do that. But the frustrating part to me is that's one of the perks of bringing back an incumbent starter at quarterback is you get to skip some of that stuff typically. And it doesn't seem like Auburn gets to. And to me, that's a little concerning.
I think it's not as much. I know fans will not like this. This is not about Peyton. This is about the receiver corps. Some of them, I got young guy, like they're trying to get Cam up and they know he's going to be a guy. He's going to end up starting this year. We all know it. But they need Bryce Kane and some of the other guys to take a step forward too. Some of the guys that were sophomores and juniors last year, going to be juniors and seniors, got to take a step forward or they're just going to double Cam. And it's going to be ugly. It's going to be like the Alabama game all over again where they just manned up and the outside guys got mauled. Mm-hmm. It's just true. So they have to get this stuff down with all the technique and stuff before they can install all the other stuff. It's got to put the horse before the cart.
Yeah. Yeah. And there are guys that you feel good about, like Rivaldo Fairweather at tight end.
He's a dude. He's a dude.
In an interview with Andy Burcham, voice of the Auburn Tigers earlier this week, he said he wanted to double all the stats from a year ago. It's like, that would be great. That would be awesome if you could do that. I mean, 60 catches for Rivaldo, give that to me, please. But
yeah,
and you may need it. You may certainly need it, just especially if Cam Coleman is kind of the only guy that gets any sort of attention on the outside of the passing game. But I've liked what I've seen from Sam Jackson. Sam Jackson's actually really surprised me. I didn't buy it. I didn't buy it when that news broke that he was, changing positions and transferring to Auburn. I just didn't buy it. I didn't think it was going to work, and I'm starting to sip the Kool-Aid a little bit with Sam Jackson.
Well, you need guys pushing the pile too. They have other guys that they like, and it's Sam. When I interviewed him this week, he was positive about the room, and he thought it was going to be a lot better this year. But what else is he going to say? So again, I need to see it more than I need to hear it. but I appreciate that. And the other part is competition breeds success. So when they get the other guys in, Perry Thompson, et cetera, that's going to help. They've also talked about patience in the passing game. Check down. Don't force the ball for the love of all things holy.
Yeah.
Get the ball. We got some good running backs. A 5-yard swing pass can turn into an 80-yard touchdown.
Well, I think that's some design stuff that was lacking last year.
Oh, absolutely.
And people wanted to pile on Peyton. And it's like, well, where do you want him to go with it? Because everybody's like, yeah. And there's no check down. So I'm with you on that. So we'll see more of that, I think, in 2024. And then Robert Lewis is a guy that people continue to impact. But I do think, like, especially seems like most of his snaps and reps are pretty much all coming from the slot. I think slot guys are valuable, but for slot guys to really eat, you need attention elsewhere. And it usually needs to come from the outside. So can Cam Coleman create enough of that? Can Caleb Burton create enough of that?
He might be the guy we haven't talked about enough, to be honest.
I'm with you, dude. In fact, you and I talked about him a little bit on Tuesday together. We're like, there he is. So yeah, I like Caleb Burton a ton. And you're right. We probably aren't talking about him enough.
It only takes 1 or 2 plays where Caleb, just use him as an example, runs by a DB. They don't even have to hit it. But if he runs by a DB and it's like, oh, wow, look at that, because he can go.
Yeah.
If he runs by a couple guys, games 1 and 2, it changes your defensive game. Like, you can't give up 75-yard touchdowns. It just doesn't work out. So you got to change how you do your safeties, how much you blitz, etc. Not having deep threats last year that connected murdered Auburn's situation for third downs, because instead of 3rd and 2, it's 3rd and 6.
Yeah.
Way too often. And there's not a lot of good 3rd and 6 play calls. So Auburn has to find a couple guys. Burton would be nice. But at some point, Cam and these freshmen are going to need help because they're going to hit a wall. Some of these upperclassmen are going to have to make plays they did last year, period.
Right.
And that's what we got to see.
Right. Brian, how can people check out everything you've got going on?
auburndaily.com and at FBScout_Florida on X. We are getting towards the end of spring. Should be a lot of stuff with regards to depth charts, Auburn or otherwise, starting to come out over the next couple of weeks. This is when it's fun again. You start to project, okay, do you have a team or not? I love talking about that stuff across college football. It's a blast.
Yep. So be sure to check out Brian at auburndaily.com. Please like the video. Please subscribe. We will see you tomorrow. This has been Locked On Auburn.